Hi everyone, and welcome back to One Dish, Two Ways. So I'm going to get this started and then give you an introduction. So we are making Irish stew two ways today. This pot has no oil in it. It's just a dry pot. I've got it on medium heat, and now I'm going to add my vegetables. I've got onions, carrots, and celery that I have finely diced. You can hear the sizzle. So ultimately, you need 4 cups of these veggies. So whatever way you want to do it, Joe prefers less of the carrots. So that's why I only did a cup of carrots and I did a cup and a half each of celery and onions. But you can change that up. If your family doesn't like onions, you could put green peppers in here if you wanted. You can make it totally what you want. And I don't know if Joe can capture this, but I did use the little... you can see it somewhat on here. I did use the little leaves of the celery. I chop it up fine with the celery because I just think it gives a lot of good flavor. So we're going to get these vegetables to start cooking. I don't cook with any oil, so this is a dry skillet. If I think things are sticking and need something, I'll add a little bit of the vegetable broth we're ultimately going to need. But right now, we don't need that. So why did we choose Irish stew? Well, we both have an Irish background. St. Patrick's Day is coming up. But of course, we're flipping it completely on its head because some traditional ones call for lamb. We don't eat lamb or like corned beef, and we don't eat corned beef either. So we're just making it our own, just like you should in your house. Anytime you see a recipe, baking's a little different, but with recipes, make it your own. Make it, because if your family's not going to eat it, then you just wasted your time and your money. So always just make it what you want. So these veggies are cooking up nicely. Okay, so I'm gonna just let these sit for a minute so we can do our intro. So if you have never seen us before, the reason our channel is called One Dish, Two Ways is because we eat 2 different ways, and we're the only 2 left in our house. We're empty nesters at this point. I eat a whole food, plant-based diet, and my husband eats the standard American diet, sometimes leaning a little more towards less carbs. So we figured if other people I know have households where you eat differently, so we just kind of want to share how we do this. So we do these one dish, 2 ways. So that's why we invented this channel. I'm Sheila, and Joe's behind the camera doing all the magic behind there. So let's get back to these vegetables. So you have to tell us in the comments, do you have an Irish background? Do you celebrate St. Patrick's Day? All these vegetables are looking phenomenal. So what I want to do now, so they're starting to get a little softened, a little translucent. I want to go ahead and put our spices in so they can start blooming. So what I've got here is 2 teaspoons of black pepper. We use the restaurant, so it's a little more coarser. Teaspoon of thyme and a teaspoon of oregano. You could use rosemary. Joe's just not a huge fan of rosemary, so I chose oregano for this dish. And I'm just going to let these, Joe wants to come in and kind of see that. There you go. I want them to really add a lot of flavor, hence why I'm doing the blooming part. You do not have to do that. You could just get your veggies going and then just add everything else. It is totally your choice. Okay, these are looking and they smell phenomenal. Okay, so this is going to be our one dish. The 2 ways is going to come in how we serve it. So that's what you'll see when we come back once we get this going. Okay. So I am liking the way these are looking. So let's start adding the rest of our items. A side note. So usually with Irish stew, you use a stout beer, which is really dark beer. It's got a little different flavor than a standard, like a regular light beer. We don't drink beer, so I didn't want to have to buy a 6-pack of a stout beer. So what I did was I bought 1 beer at the store, just a regular old thing. I think I got Coors Light. But the seasonings I'm going to add is going to help still give us that flavor of traditional Irish stew without having to use that stout beer, because that would just be a waste of money for us. But if you have stout beer, definitely put that in, because I do think that's what, this is what it calls for. Okay, so let's add our potatoes next. I'd add 4 cups of potatoes. They're in a semi 1-inch dice. The reason they're in water is because I wanted to get ready for the video, so I cut them ahead. and I didn't want them to turn. So if you keep them in water, they won't turn. So that's why they're in the water. And these are russet potatoes that I peeled and then diced, but not as smaller dice as the pepper, or excuse me, as the onions, tomato. Oh my gosh, tomato, nope. Onions, carrots, and celery. My goodness. You'd think I hadn't eaten and I had low blood sugar, but that's not the case. Okay, these potatoes are looking good. If you did gold potatoes, you wouldn't need to skin them, but I felt like on russets with stew that it would probably come out much better if I took the skin off. Plus our potatoes really need to be used, and I didn't like the way the skin was looking. So I was like, no, we'll just leave that off. Okay, just getting all this stirred around. Oh my gosh, it smells so good, doesn't it, Joe? Oh, yes. Okay, now let's add our tomato paste. So we've got 1/4 cup of tomato paste here. This is going to help it do the, stews are thicker than soups. And because this stew, we're not cooking it with any meat, we're adding that later, we needed to still give it that thick, I don't know how to describe it. Stew's just got this more thicker, yes, gravy-like. You're exactly right. Thank you, Joe. So I've got the tomato paste stirred around. And then the other 2 things I'm going to add to help make up for not having the stout beer is I'm going to add a teaspoon of tamari. You could also use Worcestershire sauce. Just this is what I have is tamari. It's low sodium. And I'm going to add a teaspoon of red wine vinegar. It's not going to be a heavy vinegar taste. I know my husband doesn't like it, but it will bring out the other flavors. And if you're worried about the beer, you could also not add beer and just add more broth. But I will tell you, you're not going to taste beer because that alcohol will cook off. Okay. I like stirring it in stages just so everything has a chance to just melt together. Oh my goodness, that smells so good. Okay, let's add the beer. So I've got 16 ounces or 2 cups of beer. And I've got 4 cups of vegetable broth. Oh, wow. Okay. Now we need this to come up to a boil so that then we can close it up and simmer. Tip about the potatoes. You got to remember what vessel you're going to be using to eat your dish. So in this case, we're going to be using a spoon. So you don't want your vegetables to be so much that they won't go onto a spoon. That's why I chose the dice that I did, but I didn't want them so small that it was like we were eating potato soup. I wanted to make sure we still had some chunks of potatoes that are going to be nice and tender. So hence why I chose what I chose. So there you go. We're going to get that back up to a boil. Then I'm going to reduce it. Oop, we got a little onion here. Cover it, and then I'm going to cover it, and then at 20 minutes, take the cover off, and I'm going to test to see if the potatoes are done. And if they are, then we're going to add our slurry of cornstarch and water because we want it to thicken a little bit, and that will help that thickening process. So when we come back, I will show you what it looks like. The potatoes are tender. We'll add our cornstarch. Then we'll show you how we're going to serve it up. So thank you, everybody. We'll be right back. Okay, everyone. I just took the lid off, and I'm going to make sure that the potatoes are ready, but they should be. So I'm just grabbing some, and look, you can go right through there with your fork. We don't want to mush, so this is perfect. So now we need to add our cornstarch slurry so that we can get this a little thickened. So there's 1 tablespoon of water. Well, apparently I tried to get it ready, and I got it a little too ready. So note to self, don't do that, and that's not going to work. Hold on a second. This is real kitchen cooking, everybody. Okay, need more liquid to get that. I got it ready before we were waiting for this to happen, and I guess it got too ready. Okay, there we go. Okay, so it's 2 tablespoons of cornstarch, 1 tablespoon of water. I did end up having to use some of the broth so that we could get it to not thickened up. Now, I don't want to waste any of that. Oh my gosh, this smells so good. So that we don't waste any of this, I'm just going to put a little bit. There we go. Make sure I get it all out. Okay, we're just going to let that do its thing. It's already starting to thicken. I'm not sure if you can see that, Joe. It's already starting to do it. So it's just going to need probably a minute. So while that's doing it, let's come over here to the counter. Whoop. There's Rizzo, our foster dog. He's just waiting for anything that could possibly drop. So let's talk about the two ways we're going to serve it. So for me, whole food plant-based, I've got some kidney beans. You can use a can of kidney beans that you've drained and warmed, rinsed and drained and warmed up. I cooked kidney beans in the Instant Pot yesterday, so these are ready to go, and they're just warmed up in the microwave. And for Joe, we got pot roast. So yesterday, we made a roast. He had that for dinner. And the one thing about eating this way, it's hard to buy a roast for one person. So, or open a can of beans. So we like to utilize the freezer also. So we made the chuck roast yesterday. He ate some of it. We've got some of it shredded to go on his Irish stew. And then the rest of it, he will probably put in the freezer. So that will be for a few more weeks down the road. We love to utilize the freezer when our life is really busy one week or when we've gone out of town for the weekend and we don't have time to do our normal food prep. This gives us food to eat. We just pull it out of the freezer and let it defrost. So that's how we're going to serve it today. So let's go get it because it should be thick enough by now. Let's turn this off. There we go. Ooh, buddy, that smells delicious. Okay, so let's plate it up, and Joe can come in here and get his ready to go. Did you get a good shot of it, honey? Probably very steamy. Okay, so I'm going to do mine that way. With some beans. Oh, that looks so good. I'm going to get yours. And then there's yours. So I got enough meat for you? Okay. So let's give this a try. So let's look at the final product. There you go. One dish, two ways, Irish stew. Okay. Time to taste. Oh, you want me to taste first? It's going to be hot. Oh, you can feel that steam. Potatoes are good. Are not mushed. They're perfect. The kidney beans are good. The carrots, the celery, the onions, and the flavor is really deep. I guess that's the only way I can use to describe it. Would you agree? The flavor's it's got depth to it.
Well, it tastes fine.
Yeah.
It's just like you can tell there's the flavors from the beer are in there, but it's not like the alcohol. You're just tasting that little extra something that's in there. The pot roast, it's already been cooked and it was already shredded up, so it's tender as can be already. So all we have to do is just let it cool to where we don't burn our face off.
Boy, this is so good. It'd be a great leftover for lunch. This is a Sunday, so we like to do food prep, and then Paul will be able to portion these out in smaller containers for lunch. So I'd say it's another success. What do you think?
Mm-hmm.
Yep.
And the other day, you saw a video from last week. We had snow on the ground. And we were thinking, let's do a stew. And today it's supposed to be back up to almost 65 degrees. So you can't plan for it. You just do what you can do. But
that's right.
We had, I think she bought a 3-pound, maybe 4 The pot roast, when she braised it and then put it in the oven all day yesterday, I got dinner out of that with mashed potatoes. Now we'll get at least 3 servings out of this pot easily with the leftover, and there's actually more pot roast left over that I'll have that I'll put in the freezer for a lunch or something later this week or next week, whenever. So 3 meals out of 1 dish is not a bad way to go with today's budget. That's for sure.
Well, actually more than that, because you're going to get 3 out of this, and you got 1 last night, and then you'll probably have another, because this is how much is left of it that will go in the freezer. So, yeah. With grocery prices rising, you definitely got to do stuff to stretch that budget. So, thank you, everyone, for joining us, and I hope you enjoyed this 1 dish, 2 ways. You're brave. I can't do anymore. It's too hot. Thank you, everyone. Have a great week.